If I and so many other of the gadflies that occupy your radio and television screens are like Pinocchio, then our Jiminy Cricket would be Mark Thomas. Okay, he's the conscience that we try so hard to ignore, and yet annoyingly he will not go away. Will you, Mark?
I won't. I'm just there with a little top hat.
He's a little top hat and a brolly, whistling, trying to get our attention. And this time out, the whistle takes the form of a new book called As Used on the Famous Nelson Mandela. It's by Mark Thomas. It's out now. Underground Events in the Arms Trade and Torture Trade. Where does the title come from, As Used On? What is that?
The title comes from an arms dealer's website, and he was advertising South African leg irons. And the title comes from the strapline, which was As Used on the Famous Nelson Mandela.
He was actually using that to say, that is just... It just seems so remarkable. But they haven't
got any sort of sense of how people see them, arms dealers, by and large.
Yeah.
Like, I phoned up an arms dealer in South Africa to talk about... Because I set up these little companies so that I can...
This was so you could expose and find out what the business is.
Yeah, just find out what they're doing. And
not that you were dealing with arms. I don't know why I felt the need to clarify that. As if I think, you weren't actually dealing with in arms.
I've got a new sideline, Jonathan. I need to tell you about.
Yeah.
It's a designer range. So I phoned up this South African company to talk about electroshocks, sort of torture equipment, and I said, can I talk to someone? And they say, hang on 1 minute, let me put you through to the expert. I'll just put you on hold. And they put me on hold, and they played, as hold music, Love Me Tender. So I'm listening to Elvis, Love Me Tender, hello, electroshock, and it's this sort of nutty world.
That's a very good South African accent you're doing there as well. Have you used that to go undercover, Mark?
No, I haven't, fortunately. I have used a very dodgy Kurdish one.
Is this still going... Well, we'll get to that in a minute. I've never even heard a Kurdish accent. Is that to do with the dam, the Kurdish dam? That
it was to do with it.
Well, maybe get to that in a minute. Hey, what's the deal then with the arms and torture trade? Because I assumed a lot of it had gone away. I thought that our government was trying to sever our relationship with such trade and industry. Is this not correct?
No, it's not. Well, you see, the interesting thing is you have an enormous amount of arms that are out there in the world. There's about 640 million small arms, and we add to that number by 8 million each year. 500,000 people die each year through the use of small arms in conflicts, gangsters, robberies, whatever. Now, the weird bit is if the Tories got 0 out of 10 for the arms trade, Labour have got about 2. They've done a few bits and bobs, but they haven't done an enormous amount. The bits they've done have been reasonably good.
And why is that? Because this is something which I think if you were to sit anyone down one-on-one and say, here are the facts, here are the figures, this is what it's been used for, I think no one would sit there face-to-face with you and say, yeah, but I still support it wholeheartedly.
You see, this is the interesting thing about it, because the big arguments for the arms trade, the two big ones are, if we didn't do it, somebody else would.
Which is no sort of argument at all, of course.
Well, no, because otherwise you'd have to turn around and say, well, Gary Glitter should go free. Because that's a stupid...
That's a heart-stopping moment when anyone says that. But what do I say back to that? But
it's
you're
an
right.
extreme example,
it's a
but it
ridiculous thing to say, yeah.
The other argument they use is they say, well, it's good for the British economy. To which my reply is twofold. One is so is a car crash. If you look at the amount of money that's generated, through, from police through to sort of hospital porters, cleaners, etc.
Any conflict, in fact, that ends badly, there are people who have to clean up after it.
And you will get money out of it. There'll be economic growth. But more importantly, one of the chapters in the book I go through with some academics, and we work out how much the British arms trade is subsidised by, because the government subsidises it. And it works out, these are rough figures. I don't like the word ballpark because that's an American phrase and we don't have ball. These are municipal park figures.
Okay.
These are municipal park figures, and it works out that per worker in the export of arms in Britain, we subsidise them by £13,000 a year each.
Per worker?
Yeah. Wow. So it works out about 850 million a year.
So it's not doing us any good whatsoever.
So we've skewed the economy. We've absolutely skewed our own economy.
So why do they still trade in it? Why?
Because politicians believe it gives them a chance to punch above their weight on the world stage. It's for diplomatic reasons. They can get involved. Look, Britain can no longer... America's the world's cop, right? They've got the might, the military power and the political will. Britain can't do that, but... we can be the world's community police support officer with our little arms trade.
It's an awful thing, though. It's a terrible thing, and I don't think I know anyone who would want us to still be involved in it.
Well, you see, there are exceptions, I think, which are interesting, because if you look at some of the grey areas, like for example, if you lived in Liberia, you've got a right to peace and security. You've got a right to live free of fear from gangsters and warlords and child soldiers and marauding bandits, and that means a police force that is armed with the respect of rule and law and human rights.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, we do need weapons in some ways, but I don't live in Liberia. I live here, and I don't want our government involved in this kind of
thing. Well, this stuff also comes back to us. That's the point. People trying to think that, well, it's just something that happens over in Congo.
Yeah, the concern
or whatever.
people have over here is the number of guns on the streets over here now, which does seem to be on the increase, and knives and that kind of like affiliation with violence and violent crimes.
And where do those guns come from? You know, they come from respectable companies that go through a whole series of chains of...
Not the gun fairy. They come from actual industry.
It'll be right, yes, the gun fairy.
Do you think
I left an empty wallet under my pillow.
Do you think we'll ever come to a stage, though, where we don't have this kind of industry? Not just us, but, you know, are you an optimist about
I am an
humanity's
extreme
future?
optimist, but I'm also sort of tempered with some realism. And I think it's about... What it's about is reducing harm. It really is about that, because if you can reduce that number of guns that are out there in the world, 640 million, if you can reduce that, it's a harm reduction policy, which is great. And you can also actually put pressure on governments by not arming them. If you're going to go and arm an undemocratic regime, as Britain routinely does, if you look at the stuff Labour's licensed, it's nuts.
I can't wait to go through the book, but I know it's going to make me furious.
But there's also great stuff in there that's really exciting.
Yeah, but I stopped reading kind of like political writing because I used to get so angry afterwards. It makes me so angry, and then I was thinking, I don't want to be angry, so what I do is I pick up a nice thriller.
This has got a mixture.
Okay. I'm not saying I won't read it, but
there's a mate of mine called Nick who's probably the premier activist in this country, and he's a very posh guy. This is how posh he is. Well, I once was talking to him and said, my son says I'm like Homer, and he goes, well, in the episodic storytelling structure of your work... no, this is the yellow guy, not the dead Greek guy. But he was involved in various campaigns with us, and he used to go and do meetings in the Kurdish regions, and these notes used to go round, just going, there's a secret policeman in the room, don't make too much fuss. And Nick's great, because he just goes, OK, we need to have the meeting because otherwise we lose political ground, but we need to keep people safe. So what he did was he said, right, everyone, what we do back home is we all put the chairs in a circle so we can all see each other. So all these people put the chairs in a circle. And then he said, now, back home, we have these little traditions when we have these meetings. I think we ought to have them today. What we do is, individually, we take turns to stand up, say who we are, where we're from, and what we hope to get out of the meeting. And he said these room full of Kurdish moustaches just laughing, and one set of panicked policemen's eyes just going, get me out of here.
We've got to go to the news. We will talk to you more afterwards, Mark, because not only is it a fascinating subject, but also I want to talk more about the other work that you've been involved in over the years, and also your comedy, because, you know, first and foremost, essentially you're a comedian.
Yeah,
a comedian with a conscience. OK, you listen to Radio 2, 88 to 91 FM. This is Radio 2 from the BBC. Marvellous sound of divine comedy. Yes. Our friend Neil Hannon. We have Mark Thomas with us. He has a book at the moment called As Used on the Famous Nelson Mandela, which is, believe it or not, an actual quote that Mark discovered on an arms dealer site selling leg irons in South Africa. Yeah, are they the best ones, South African, if I wanted to buy some?
Well, do you know what, Jonathan? There's no rules about importing them into this country.
So we can bring them in, we just can't sell them.
If you want to set up some kind of test situation...
I'm sure I could flog them in Camden Lock, couldn't I?
I think you probably could.
Lemmy, you were telling us about your friend and his exploits in the Kurdish area where he was...
Well, Nick, this is my mate Nick. He basically, he's an amazing campaigner, and he took him and an academic called Dr. Sue Hawley. And they're the kind of people, they're brilliant people, but if you saw them, you just think you've come from a wheat-free diet convention. Do you know what I mean? They're really nice, but they...
Tree huggers.
Yeah, they are tree huggers. And they found out that the British government had watered down all its anti-bribery stuff. Yeah. And they took them to court, and they faced, you know, the political clout of BAE Systems and Rolls-Royce and the CBI, who had organised all these meetings with the government, and they won. And, you know, that's a fantastic thing, that these two people can take a government and these companies and challenge the might of these companies in a court.
Reassuring then that the law is still open to those kind of challenges, and that people... So it's not...
on occasion, it is.
So it's not an entirely corrupt system, and it's not something which... But there are...
Well, somebody asked me recently, said, somebody was very earnest, I think, he said, you know, can you think of 3 reasons why we're not living in a police state? And I said, well, firstly, I'm about to answer that question as honestly as I can, which will be a good one.
Is it tiresome? Because when Mark came in earlier, I asked you about something about how many people do you need to have in a protest before the police get involved? And I thought, you must get this. It's a bit like being a doctor. Is people say, I've got this problem in my back. Yeah, people come up to you and say, Mark, I need to know about what's happening in, you know, what's happening with the Kurds at the moment and the dam and the situation.
Some people do that, and some people can't go, have you heard about? Which is great, and they'll give me little sheets and stuff like that.
The dissemination of information. Do you have a website? Do you pass information? Do you keep a blog?
Yeah,
Are you involved in that kind of thing?
We have the website, and that's markthomasinfo.com.
Okay, and this is where you funnel stuff in?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm doing at the moment is, you know, Brian Hoare down in Parliament Square?
Yes, he's the protester, which is, if you don't know, he's the man who's been sitting outside there for about 3 years now.
5 years.
And I see him a lot because we drive past.
Yeah, the government introduced part of the Serious Organised Crime and Police Act, Articles 132 through to 138, specifically to kick him out.
And this was to stop him protesting.
Yeah, they said, if you want to protest in Parliament Square, you have to have a licence.
This was the war he was protesting at, wasn't it?
And basically, his lawyers went to court and said, well, actually, the law says you need a licence if you start protesting after the date that the Act has been published. And because he was protesting before it, so he doesn't need one. And some balmy old judge went, no, you're absolutely right.
Fantastic. But they're great that there are balmy old judges who are outside of the system to that
extent. And they are really good, and they're just sort of... I mean, if you look at the House of Lords, and you look at the number, and the Law Lords, the number of things they've done for human rights, and you thought, I never thought I'd see that.
Yeah.
It's quite weird.
But that's quite heartening, really, isn't it?
It is. It is in many ways. But one of the things we're doing is because of a mate of mine was having a picnic in Parliament Square, and the police decided that because she had a cake in her picnic with the word peace iced upon it, it was a political cake and therefore a protest. And they threatened her with arrest because she had the word... It was only a little... It wasn't like a big cake.
No, but why did they do that? Why are they wasting their time? You'd think they'd have a bit more common sense, wouldn't you?
Well, you can't argue with a piece of cake. I think it starts with a piece cake, and it could end up with sandwiches, and then perhaps a peace hamper.
Or a piece custard pie.
Next thing you know, it's peace pims and everyone's drunk on peace.
Absolutely, in Parliament Square.
And it's just so...
So we started doing this thing where you need a licence and approval to do these demos. So I started going along to the police and say, I'd like to do a demonstration. I've got now official bits of paper from the police that said, we give you permission to have a demonstration calling on the abolition of the need to get permission for demonstrations. And we had one recently. We had a defence of surrealism, because you can have a demo on anything. And so we had a defence of surrealism. There were people in Parliament Square with banners with just wallpaper on it, just waving going, "Way!"
I like it when you see, because I drive past Parliament Square quite a lot, because one of my children goes to school over there. She's actually just stopped going there, but we used to drive past every day. And sometimes you will see some odd little demonstration. There was one recently, and there must have only been about 6 or 7 people involved, and I felt like stopping and joining in, because there were about 3 or 4 policemen at the front, then there were like 5 or 6 people with banners. A couple of them didn't look really that committed, and then about another 3 or 4 policemen, and it was quite hard to work out what was going on.
Possibly there was a cake in the middle of that with a slogan.
I think some of them would stop for the cake. Mark, do you ever feel like, because of your involvement in the various campaigns you're involved in and your attempt to actually kind of help disseminate information, do you ever feel like you've kind of basically lost track of what you started doing in the first place, lost your comedy way, and
I'm quite happy to have sort of wandered off in this way, but I've deviated from the path of the comic structure. It's very weird, because when I started doing stand-up, which was like 21 years ago, I remember having a manager who was a very camp Scottish guy. It was a very working class camp Scottish manager, and everyone should have one. And he just like everyone should have an Australian friend. Do you know what I mean? You need to have an Australian friend. And he was just fantastic. But he used to say, I think you've got a career in front of you. And I used to accuse him of using the C word. I said, don't use that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want a career structure. And it's very strange, because comedy has become quite... It has become set ways in which you progress.
It's become such a clear business now. Yeah. It's a little bit like the way the music industry became a very clear business for a while. It seems to have strayed away from that again now, so maybe comedy's going to break down a bit.
I really like the fact that you can just wander off and do whatever you want. I mean, that's what interests me, that I can go off and do a show about a dam, or I can go and sort of... I'm quite lucky. I can go and sort of spend time wasting the police time.
But I would have thought with the internet now, there's always people you can reach. It's not quite as rigid as it was in the past, where you needed someone to help you get information about your gig out. You needed someone who could, publicise what you're doing. Now you can kind of do it yourself, can't you?
Yeah, you can. You can put all sorts of stuff. When we were talking the other day and going, we've got this great idea for telly, and actually we thought, do you know what, we could do this ourselves. We could just make this on a DVD and just bung it on the site.
It's incredible, isn't it?
I really like that.
Do you do much live work anymore, though? I see your name occasionally. Normally it seems on benefit gigs, often appearing alongside Robert Newman, it seems, or just on the same page or mentioned in the same breath.
My wife opened the family diary. We have a family diary. We put all the events in. My wife opened the family diary for June and just went, you haven't done a single gig for money. You haven't done a single gig.
My wife has the opposite problem.
So does the
You haven't done any
licence fee
charity
payer.
work for 4 years. What's wrong with you? Oh, I bung something for comic relief then, darling.
You always do comic relief, actually.
Yeah,
don't
but
you?
it's only because people see me doing it. It makes me look good. Mark, it's lovely having you again. We've got the Hot Puppies competition. I'm going to kick you out in a minute.
Excellent.
The book, as used on the famous Nelson Mandela, is out now. It's. I'm sure I haven't read it yet. I've just been given a copy today, but I'm sure it's funny as well as informative, as all your work is.
Yeah, there's some weird folk that I actually met some arms dealers who I liked. And it really is surprising.
But that's what I admire about you, is your openness. You don't go in prejudging. You go in saying, what is the situation? Let's find out. Let's find out about the people
I
involved.
met. Have I got time just to tell
Yes,
you
please
story?
do.
He's an amazing guy. He sold the gun that was used in the Kalashnikov that was used in the Hungerford massacre. And I met him, and he's an interesting guy. And he's kind of like his Hertfordshire working class lad. You know, just now he runs a £2 million business selling guns. And I was talking to him about weapons and stuff. I said, "How'd you get into it?" And he said, "I've always been into it as a kid." I said, was it hunting?" And his face went bright red and just went, "I would never kill an animal." And there was this really weird moral line, and I began to like him. And we started chatting away, and the phone went. We were in his car, and his like blue chip thing went, and he was having a chat. He was very irate with someone at the other end, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I've got shotguns that are coming in from France, going to there for Heathrow, and they won't put them on a plane. And they won't put them on a plane because they're 18-inch, and citizens aren't allowed to have 18-inch, but they're not for citizens, they're for mercenaries going to Iraq to guard the embassies." I said, that's awful. And his face went red again and just went, "I'll tell you what it is, Mark. It's political correctness gone mad."
But what a strange situation to be in, to be sitting with someone who you know is dealing in these instruments, which are going to wind up at the end of the day with someone being killed. I mean,
Yeah, ultimately, that's what they do.
And
yeah,
he's making
absolutely.
money from that. And so it's surprising me to hear you
odd.
say that I like him.
I did like him as a bloke. He was just an intriguing man, and he like all of us, flawed. And and it was interesting talking about where his moral lines were and his sense of responsibility and what he believed about freedom and really, he was a libertarian.
But is it the case that ultimately, though, you can find ways of justifying whatever you do to yourself, no matter how reprehensible it might appear to others?
But there's also a bit of him that was incredibly, in all of us, whenever you meet anyone, if you meet, I meet lots of politicians, and my dread fear is I'm going to meet some awful right-wing, evil sort of like pro-hang 'em and flog 'em, and they're going to be charm personified, and invariably they are. And actually that's okay, because life is complex.
It is complex, and everyone has some good aspects, and, present company accepted, some bad aspects. So, Mark, lovely to see you again. Thank you so
Nice
much
to
for
see
coming
you.
in. Good luck with the book. Good luck with all of your free gigs you're doing this year. Please do make some time to earn a little bit of money for yourself as well. OK, what are we going to play, Andy?
Bit of Jackie Wilson.
Excellent.